for this course is like to use, like you also know how to use this, it means applied site from the time series. Then after that we move to the panels. So today we not only talk about the issue, we're going to still remember our lab test, right? We have two questions. One question on the time series and another one question on the panels. So we're going to do, if we have time, we're going to do one of the revision. We pick out one question and then discuss. Then it means after we discuss about the issue, then we follow our discussion with this something like revision on our panels based on this the lab test question. So then after that, you want to discuss about group assignment. So welcome. So now about this issue, right? So about this issue on the panels, especially panel, right? Yeah, issue on the panel analysis. So as we know, as we are aware, right, we bring out the issue stationarities, right? Then about the cross dependency. So actually the issue in the time series. So as we are aware in the time series, we have to take care about the stationarity of the series itself. If the series is not stationary, if we estimate by using the conventional approach, we will have something like make our estimation will be biased. So this we call as a spurious regression. Spurious regression. So under the condition of this spurious regression, we make our result, especially the test statistic, the diagnostic check, mean that diagnostic check and including, right, all become misleading. So that's why we have to be cautious about in the time series about this stationarity issue. Then that's why in the panel analysis we also have to take care of this stationarity issue, right? Because we not in the panel we actually combine the cross sectional together with the panel. So with this combination, so the issue in the time series remains not solved yet, right? Unsolved yet. So we have to tackle in the panel as well. So in the panel analysis is much more challenging because we not only tackle the issue in the time series, we also need to tackle the issue in the cross sectional as well. For example, the individual effect. So this individual effect we have to be very careful. So that's why we start from the pool OS, right? Just estimate the pool panels. Then after that, we go through this time series, right? We go to the list of pool OS, then fixed effect, random effect. Then we bring out the issue stationarity that we face in the time series analysis. So not only that, we also have to tackle the cross-sectional dependency. That's why we have to test like cross-dependency test. So not only that cross-dependency test, we also bring out the issue, the choice up between these fixed effect, random effect, as well as is it just a simple pool as is it enough already for our estimation. So we have a lot of the diagnostic tests to diagnose, not a lot, right? Like to test for the fixed effect, to test whether we have a random effect, and then to test the difference between fixed and also the random, the choice between the pool and the random, right? So we have a different diagnostic test for to help us to choose the best, not say best, appropriate models. So that one we tackle in the lab test, right? That's why I ask you, even though the answer, not say answer, but even though the result, not much difference, right? Not much difference amongst this econometric approach, the fixed panel, fixed random as well as the pool S. But you maybe you can see the differences is because of this based on the diagnostic test, the coefficient will be a little bit different, right? Even though a little bit different, but we still have policy implication from our little bit difference there, right? So that is the maybe because of the data set, right? Or the data set actually do not show any big differences in the estimation amongst this econometric approach. But in fact, I'm sure you go through your group assignment, right? So you can see the differences if you apply the panel in your group assignments. So after the lab test, we cover this panel qualification, right? Panel qualification. So seems like something like in your time series, once we found there is what we say I1 variables, then that's why the conventional approach is no longer appropriate. So we need to use this something like the approach that accommodate the I1 variables. So what we use as well to see whether there is a long run relationship amongst the variable of interest when all the variable actually I1. So in the period of order 1 means that we have to first difference the series only long run coefficient, right? The coefficient in the long run as well as the coefficient in the short run. So we have a long run and short run. So in that scenario, we not only have the long run, short run, we also have ECN models, right? Error correction models to see how fast the duration to release a means and convergence in the long run. So we also can use this kind of approach to study the causality because what we study so far, what we handle so far, right, is just something like regression. Regression, right? Yeah. We not only test the stationarity of the series, we also estimate the models. So once you estimate the model, either you're using the OS or you're using the panel like the POF, fixed effect, random effect. Actually, you estimate a model. You estimate a regression, and then the idea is regression does not necessarily imply the causation. There's a slogan in the econometric. So, for example, if you estimate the models, your dependent variable investment, your independent variable consists of the CAP, BNL. Once you estimate the models, then you found that these two independent variables actually significantly affect the dependent. So the moral of this story is, even though you found that they are significant, it does not imply that these two independent variables actually gradually cause your investment. So that's why called regression does not imply causation. Does not imply that the CAP and BML will gradually cause the investment. So we have to use the gradual causality test. So we bring out this issue in the time series, right? We show you the time series. We can have this one strong, right? Strong causal, maybe it's a one-way causal or two-way causal or bi-directional causal amongst the variable of interest. Then in the panel, we also can do that. In the panel, we also have this kind of setting for you to explore later, right? To study about the causality in the panel setting. So that is actually the things we want to cover in this further econometrics. Okay. Actually, not only that. Actually, something like last week, right? We talked about the panel ARDL. So you still remember there is an asymmetry, something like the available column there, right? Actually, for you to explore about this nonlinear effect. So actually, in the time series, we have an asymmetry ARDL. In the panel, we also have an asymmetry panel ARDL. Actually, want to see when a certain variable there is a negative changes, then what happens to your dependent variables? If certain variable on your right hand side independent variable, for example, if there is appreciation, what happens to your inflation? When there is a depreciation, what happens to your inflation? So maybe do not say inflation. If there is a appreciation, what happens to economic growth? When there is a depreciation, what happens to the economic growth? So you can use this what we say the asymmetry ARDL. If you want to use this calibration approach, you can use this asymmetry ARDL to achieve your objective. So there is an asymmetry effect. So now, let's see. I don't know why all when it comes to my spectrum, right, and my unpaid all will become the black first. So luckily I have WhatsApp, right, to share my files here. So okay, so about this issue, right? Issue in the panel. So like in the conventional, like as before we proceed one to one, right? So because this one is a very worthy, right? Very worthy one because we do not have something like a so these are the four things that we want to discuss today, right? Advantages, as we are aware that what are the advantages by using panels, and what are the challenges? Like we said just now, the challenges like wherever we face a time series, we'll bring up here, right? Where to handle here. So it's not one challenge. Then linear versus non-linear. The non-linear here is something like for example, all the approaches we studies we discuss in this within these 12 weeks, right? Actually, is on linear. We study on linear. Actually, non-linear. For example, like as the approach I mentioned just now, the asymmetric. So if we want to see something like the asymmetric effect, then we can apply this non-linear. Actually, the non-linear is if we say actually do not have the theory to support non-linear, because all the econometrics, all the economics theory, right, is just a linear form. It's a linear form. So because of this, the data set itself, so because of this characteristic of the data, so we have to handle the non-linear. That's why something like the enhancements, right, in the technology. So all the econometric approach now becomes advanced and more advanced. So linear go to the non-linear, right? So and then this non-linear also got some challenging also we have to handle, because as we mentioned just now, does it support by the economics theory or not? So whenever something like you go through your research project papers, right? So the supervisor will ask you what is the theory behind. For example, you want to study about the economic growth, actually what is the theory, right? So the theory actually, you want to study about the determinant for economic growth. So you not only that, oh, I want to study about economic growth, I have my independent variable like inflation, like interest rate. Actually, what is the theory? Because if you want to specialize in the field of, for example, like applied econometrics, you need the theory to support you, right? To support your, what we say, this, your models. Let's say, okay, I follow the Solow, I want to say I follow the Solow growth models. So these are one of the well-known theory in the economics. Maybe you say, I don't want to study about the economic growth model, I want to study about the consumption models. So the Keynes consumption models. So you say, okay, my model is derived from the Keynes consumption model. So my dependent variable is consumption, then my independent variable consists of the, actually the theory will show you actually what are the key determinants, right, for the consumption, your income as well as your interest rate. These are the two key determinants for the consumption models, for consumption equation. So that's why investment also have. That's why you ask me why only CFD and BAL. These are the two variables, right? That something like the key variables in the investment. So that is the thing. So linear versus non-linear, dynamic versus static. So dynamic, as we mentioned in the autoregressive distributed lag models, right? So why we have the autoregressive? Autoregressive means we have a lag, something like this, the lag independence variables. Actually, what we can say that not the response, right? The response to, for example, the policy response to the any changes in the economy, not in the same time period, not simultaneously. It will take some effect to be realized in the real economy. So we need to have this dynamic. Like we say, the several reasons, like the psychological reason. For example, another reason like institutional reason, right? So there are several reasons why the real effect not realized or not appear in the markets in the same time. For example, like today, right? Government suddenly said, okay, remove the subsidy for the chicken meat. So is it the demand for chicken meat going to change now? Maybe yes, maybe if you are very rational, right, you will go to line up to purchase the chicken meat, right? Maybe the demand for chicken meat will be realized in the tomorrow or 2 days after or 1 week after, right? It was not going to not going to change the economy in the same time t. That's why we need the dynamic. That's why the static model people criticize because it's not that rational compared to dynamic. Dynamic is much more can capture the real effect in the economy. That's why dynamic is much more something like better to capture compared to static. So what else? The micro panel versus the macro panel modeling. The micro side, where actually the models we cover so far means that the setting we cover so far is much focused on the macro panel and macro side. So like investment, right? Because we are not go to the firm level. Because I understand that some of you in the project paper, I said I want to focus on the micro like the regional, right? Regional, like the sectoral, like the industry level. That is micro. So you are very something like very specific one. Want to study on the sectoral level or the regional level. That's called micro panel, and you have a lot of this a lot of ends. And so far we cover is firm levels, right? We have time firms, regional, a lot, right? For the north, for the south, for the east, for the west. So for example, state level, Malaysia got how many states? Something like 14, right? 14 states. So you have 14 states. So let's say you have you want to study about the much more like a specific case, like the firm level, not only 10 firms. Maybe you want to focus on 50 or 100 firms. Is it possible? Possible, right? Because we have a lot of firms, right? A lot of firms in US, not only the 10 firms we cover so far. So if you want to study about the micro side, you have to increase your net. So you will provide a much more general policy implication to all the firms in US instead of just select like the 10 big firms in the US. So that is the called micro panels. And micro panels, any different compared to the macro? Macro just like what I did in the lecture, like I just select like the 10, right? 10 firms. So that is called macro. So as I promised you also, right, you also going to study the money demand in the panel. In the time series, we focus on time series, I think you know. In the time series lecture, we have a money demand model. That's why in the time series basis, right? So we're going to have some panel analysis today. So let's go. Very good. Come. So you also not on actually the issue in the panel, right? Not only this three, not only linear, non-linear, dynamic, static, micro, macro. Actually, you can see how people apply the panel here, right? You can take a look the panel data models. So this is the journal articles in the Science Direct. So you can see, you can go through the journal articles, right? See how people apply the panel. So actually already moved to the non-parametric estimation. This one is 2001, already old, right? Still some recent development. Oh, my screen is here. How to move the screen here? Let me speak. Copy. Come here. Please. Yeah, it's okay. I don't know why my desktop here got two screens. And then okay, here is correct. So there are panel data and difference in different estimation. I think now students like to use this different estimation, right? So that's why it's used to study about the something like policy, right? So that is another direction for you to produce difference in different estimation. So and then you also can use the panels to do forecasting. And then what else? Many. You see the fixed effect, right? So remember the area we also talk about the fixed effect, right? Yeah. So there are many things for you to go through. This is all the good journal that we should go through if you want to something like more on the applied side, right? Like you want to have something like want to study about this economic side. So these are the journals for you to consider to go through, right? If you want to study about energy, you can go to the energy economy and go through what is their recent discussion in the energy economy. It's called journal articles, right? Journal that published in the Science directly is something like considered maritime impact journal. So you can search that, for example, panel, right? Go through panel. I don't know whether got something like economic and geopolitical drivers for this in the South Africa panel data analysis, right? Yeah, so this was published February 2025. The new challenges for the green finance panel data analysis. So see what panel they are using. They're using the 56 developing countries, 2021. This one quite good, right? Maybe you can see. Also using system EMM. Yeah, because for the micro panels, right? So normally they said if you have something like over 50 countries, so such you have to use this what we say the system EMM you can use this phase effect, pattern effect, but the much more appropriate approach is the system PMM. This normally applied in this micro pattern analysis. Okay, this for you to something like go through. Okay, so let's come back here. How to bring back? Which there? Oh, can already now. Oh, can put here like this. I can move the screen. So okay, so these are the four basic advantages and challenges, right? So actually I also uploaded the journal articles, right? Journal articles in the spectrum for you to refer. So advantages and the challenges, like we actually discussed previously, like discussed previously. So in the panel, not only enhance efficiency, also can control for this heterogeneity and also increase the power of our statistic, and also something like can have something to see dynamic analysis, like for example like the RDL, right? So how about the challenges? So the challenges is because of this limited of this time, right? Yeah, because of limited of the time, for example, you have a time, you have only 5-10 years, so you need to increase your degree of freedoms, right? So you need to use this panel. So, but in the panel, you have to tackle this missing data because at least at means that you have to tackle, for example, the missing data. If let's say the approach you are adopting actually allow for unbalanced panel, there's no issue. If let's say there is a missing data, for example, different sample, different observation for different country. So how are you going to handle that? So in that scenario, you're going to have this different you're going to have this missing data, right? And missing 1 point or missing end of the years for one country. In that scenario, you have to use the appropriate what we say imputation techniques. Right? So either you're using the moving average or you're using the interpolation to fill up the missing data. Okay. So another issue, challenges here is the endogeneity and reverse causality. So endogeneity issue, for example, like I mentioned just now, our regression, when we regress, our dependent variable is investment, our independent variable are CAP and VAL. Not necessarily investment is the endogenous. Okay? It indicates that not necessarily the causation will run from the CAP and VAL to the investment. Right? So the endogeneity, because in that scenario, actually investment also can render cause the VAL. So you have to tackle this endogeneity issue, right? To double check whether the investment really the endogenous variable. So how about these challenges about the sample selection bias? So right? Normally in this panel, right? So how you group the sample? Can we group all the developed country in one pan? Normally if you said I want to focus the country in a developed country, in a developing, and then emerging. I want to see the investment function in these 3 different group of countries. So then you group them together, right? You group them according to their characteristic. You group them according to the income. So you have a developing and emerging. So if you do not classify them into 3 different blocks, so if you let's say you group them together, can we estimate them together? For example, your sample consists of US, consists of the Malaysia, consists of this Africa country, also got Singapore, Hong Kong, and also got something like Latin America. So you group them without take into account their country characteristic. So in that scenario, we will have a sample selection bias, right? Because they were going to have a different characteristic, right? So it might create an issue, because the researcher will ask you, why you include the grow because of this suddenly change, right? So you have to be updated in your panel analysis. Because if you focus on one country, that is easy. If you focus on panel, suddenly they change their monetary regime and you still classify them under monetary targeting. So that is a problem there. So you have to be careful. That's why you have to update frequently for your panel, right? So about the serial correlation and control scarcity. So especially control scarcity especially this control scarcity because our individual effect, right, will make the variance for the residual no longer constant. So we have to be cautious about this control scarcity issue, even though we do not touch a lot how to handle this unequal variance, right? Because we just focus on this for example the tenant area, we got tax the normative, right? We do not touch on much on this serious something like control scarcity. But serial correlation, yes, right? So we have to check out whether the residual is it suffering from this serial correlation or not. But how to solve it? Perhaps that's why you can see we need to use something like the corrector for the standard error to handle these two issues, right? So when you want to something like if you want to do the panel, right? Yeah, panel is sounds like much more advanced. Cannot say advanced. If you want, actually depends on objective. I did not say that panel is much more advanced compared to time series. So if you want to use a panel, you have to consider all these challenges and also advantages, see whether suitable to achieve objective or not, right? How about linear, right? Linear model. So as we mentioned just now, all the regression we analyzed here actually is a linear form, right? Linear form, why? Because it's very simple. Linear simple, right? Simple to estimate, simple to explain, and then the assumption of linear because based on this classical linear regression model assumption, right? The parameter estimate has to be linear, right? Linear relationship between the variable of interest and then the efficiency, right? Efficiency, and then provide the consistent estimate as the sample size increase, right? So it's and then will save a lot of job, right? Because it's simple to explain as well. Simple. How about nonlinear? Difficult. Nonlinear is because the assumption of nonlinear, and then you need to back up in the theory. Then I mentioned just now, actually all the economics theory actually just favor to the linear because they built on the linear relationship instead of nonlinear. So if we want to use, because the recent development actually is a nonlinear. Recent development is a nonlinear, so why? So nonlinear more flexible because as to have a better capture the real relationship among the variable of interest. Because the recent we have many events, right? Many economic events happen. So this more flexible modeling is much more able to capture the real phenomena instead of just about the theory side. So yeah, the theory mentioned that the appreciation going to have a negative impact on economic growth, right? And then maybe I said inflation, yeah. Inflation maybe have the positive impact on the economic growth, but actually deflation also going to have the positive impact on the economic growth. So the theory actually support one statement only, but due to this possibility of the another scenario, so the nonlinear actually is much more able to capture the relationship, right? So improve fit. So what is this? Because of this, because such regression actually linear cannot answer. Linear means that the linear models, like the model we a linear model we discussed so far, actually not able to answer the real phenomena. So you might get the low R square, for example, if you study that in the time series basis, then you might get a low R square. So if you move to the nonlinear, let's say the sweeping models, right? Let's say the threshold models, let's say this asymmetry ARDL, for example, or your models can explain the real situation instead of compared to the linear model. So it's called improved fit. Improved fit. This one, endogeneity. So address the endogeneity. Yeah, maybe right. So it's linked to this GMM. It's linked to this non-linear. Useful address the endogeneity. Maybe yes, maybe no, right? Because this endogeneity, like actually in this causalities, right? Causality. Maybe I use another scenario. In the causality also got the non-linear. Then you have the non-linear causal to address this endogeneity issue. So you can move forward that to take a look non-linear causal relationship also. So that's one to address the endogeneity and more demanding estimation. What's that? Because this non-linear, right, is not follow the conventional one, like the assumption. It's going to have more complex estimation. Even though we do not need to use a manual calculation, right? Actually, you are going to do this iteration, right, to see whether converge or not during this iterative procedure. So you can be more complex and also time consuming because you're not going to do like first iteration, you're going to have a 500 at least iteration to get the convergence right in the system. So more demanding. And also the choose, right, the choice. So the choice between linear and non-linear. So it might be it also depends on the theory, right? Depends on the theory. So which guide you the linear, which guide you the non-linear? As we mentioned, you need to back up with the theory. Whether there is a theory or justification for you to justify the relationship between the variable of interest. Whether can justify. If you can justify, then you can say your model is non-linear. But in fact, we have a test. We have to test whether the relationship between the variable of interest, whether it's linear or non-linear. That is called non-linearity test to see whether non-linear really means that really inside your regression or not. Really got non-linear relationship in your regression. We need to test it out. So that's what helps us to choose between the linear and non-linear. So how to do that? Normally you can start with the linear. That's why you can see the paper I share you in the spectrum. So normally they will start with the linear. Depends on how you design your paper. If you start with the linear, if you want to bring up the issue non-linear, then normally we'll highlight the non-linear and then they show the diagnostic test. Then they show that non-linear actually the diagnostic test is significant, so it supports non-linear instead of linear. So there is a non-linearity in the relationship. For example, like non-linear, there is a threshold, there is a turning point there. There's a turning point when the inflation, maybe some constant inflation. Maybe I ask you, is it corruption good for economic growth? Corruption, is it good for economic growth? Some say yes, some say no. Some say yes, right? Give money, you can faster the process, right? But in fact, it's not good, right? In fact, it's not good. So is it corruption will boost the economic growth? No. In fact, follow the theory, no, right? Corruption actually bad for economic growth, right? This is theory, and also follow normally we teach our kids, right? Actually, no corruption, right? Corruption not good for economic growth. But the research, not so recent, like 10 years ago already got paper published. They found out that corruption good for economic growth, but only when the corruption reach certain threshold. When the too much corruption, then bad for economic growth. If lower than the threshold, actually it's good for economic growth. So they use the non-linear to explain the situation. It means that a little bit corruption is okay, but too much corruption is bad for economic growth. Something like that. So to apply the technique into explain the phenomena. So that's why if we have you to explain, is it corruption good for economic growth? Maybe tomorrow you will start to think, right? Is it inflation good growth, then you can apply the non-linear technique, right? To study, oh, a little bit inflation, no problem, but too much inflation will not good for economic growth. So that is something like how to apply the threshold regression. Switching also same. Switching regression also same. When the economic situation is good, what happens? When the economic situation is bad, what inflation going to affect the economic growth? That's a switching regression. That is an example of this non-linear models. Okay. So that is a discussion in this field, linear versus non-linear. Then, how about the static versus dynamic? So you can see the paper I shared is talking about the static dynamic. So dynamic, right? What we can say the dynamic here, static. Before we move to dynamic, we talk about the static first. Static, simple, right? Simple explain, and then simple, and then robustness to misclassification, because we just like what we estimate so far, just apply the data and then estimate is simple to explain, very straightforward, static, right? Time t and time t, all in time t, very static one. So no problem, and then efficient, and then easy to compute. Even though you say we just press the EViews button, right? Easy to compute, right? Actually, they need to do a lot of job, right, in this EView. So it can be said efficient, easy. Then how about the dynamic? Dynamic is time dependency. Actually, is can capture the real phenomena, right? Real phenomena in the economics. That's why you can ask me the recent development in this field actually is dynamic, non-linear, alright, and also the panel. That is a recent development. But we have to handle like the panel that can accommodate the dynamic, and also can also the study the non-linear. That is something like the challenging part in this economics. And then you apply in the data, and then with this issue in the economics, then that is will come up with a new policy implication, right? So how to choose, right? Actually, how to choose? Because you say, okay, static easy, dynamic difficult, time consuming, will cost a lot of expenses, right? Have cost very costly. So how you choose? Actually, that's why when you design your group assignment, you actually normally ask me, right? Can I just study time series versus panel? Which one you will choose? That one I will say, right? Depends on your objective, right? Depends on your objective. If you will say, my group assignment panel will have a higher mark? Not necessary, right? Is it because of that? So not necessary. So depends on your objective. So if your objective is want to study the corruption in a group of countries, so it may be in 20 countries, I will suggest you to use the panel, right? So if I say I just want to study the Malaysian case, I want to study Malaysia and provide policy implication to Malaysia only, then I will suggest you use the time series, right? Because your objective will decide your approach, not the other way around. So if you have a time series data, I'm not going to ask you to do the panel, right? That's the thing, right? So the choice are also different. So how about dynamic and static? Depends on your situation also. Depends on your empirical side, your whether this side, very theoretical and empirical side, right? So whether is it got support by the theory or not? So maybe in the theory do not support dynamic one. So there is no choice for you to use the dynamic models, right? Because you're going to come up with many questions, right? You're going to demand for more questions from the reviewer, right? So that is the situation. Whether got the theory to support you, even though you say okay, for example, like the marine demand, can we have a dynamic model? Answer yes, because your current money demand it will depend on your previous money demand behavior. That is support by the theory. So there is a theoretical support already. Justification is there. So that is my reason I want to use a dynamic model for my money demand. And then how about the data availability? If because dynamic, right, you're not going to just use one lag. Dynamic means involve the lag effect. So for 30 countries, then you can use a dynamic approach, right? Because you have 20 years. You can allow for T minus 1, T minus 2, T minus 3, up to T minus 5, for example. So if you only have 4 years, 5 years, then static will be much more feasible. Static depends on data availability, and also depends on your objective to see whether you want to study about the dynamic or you just want to study about static. You want to see the static short term or the long term effect. So okay, how about the micro versus macro? So also depends on your objective, right? You want to study a micro or not? Micro means that you focus on the firm level or the individual level or the country level, right? So it's much more on micro side. Maybe you said, my lecturer did not teach me system GMM, so I do not want to use micro pen. That's also the reason, right? That was one of the reasons. So if you want to use the micro, you have to understand the approach, like the system GMM, and then we also have this actuarial diagnostic check on it, right? And also, are you going to look at the individual level, right? Are you going to tackle this heterogeneity issue because the more country you put inside, right, it's very challenging, right? So heterogeneity and also small scale analysis, because it's you're going to have what we say a lot of country, a lot of firms, but only with a limited time. So the is consider we more focused on the individual level. So how about macro? Macro is focused on the aggregate level, on the macro data set. For example, I want to study about the corruption on economic growth. So for the all countries in the world, it's a macro panel data analysis. So for example, I want to study about the since 1970 up to now, right? That is a macro panel. So I focus on the aggregate level. So I focus on the country level, for example, and then it's not that focused on this heterogeneity, right? Because it's not less emphasized, because for example, if I just invoke like 20 countries, right? So it's compared to 50 firms, 60 firms. There's not that always not emphasized on this heterogeneity issue. Even though it's important, but we also can test, right? We can test whether there's a cross dependency or not, right? Or affect each other or not. And we are focused on large scale analysis because we invoke a lot of time, right? So we can have a large scale. So we have many identity, right? Entity, for example, firm level or the country level to do the analysis. So how to choose depends on your objective. Again, depends on your objective and also the data availability. So let's say corruption. Then you found that I want to study about the macro analysis. Then I want to study about corruption on economic growth. Okay. Then data only available 2 years. Not right? 2 years. Then how are you going to solve it? If you want to study corruption on economic growth only for 2 years, is it the macro panel workable? Not workable, right? Not workable because only 2 years. So if that scenario, I will suggest you to use the cross-sectional analysis, right? So focus on 1 year, only 1 year, right? 1 years in time for all the countries in the world. Economic growth on the corruption on economic growth in that particular year on cross-sectional analysis. You still can achieve your objective, but there is a cross-sectional analysis. It's not panel, it's cross-sectional. Then how about you have 10 years. 10 years, then I only have 3 countries. In that scenario, I will suggest you to use the time, this what we say 3 countries. You can either time series or you can combine 3, then study about the macro, right? Macro panel also can. So depends on your data availability. Then you say I only have 5 years, but I have 50 countries. And you can go to the use the system GMM, right? You can have the N greater than the T, then you can use the system GMM. And also your scope analysis, right? So actually, we are not suggest you to combine these two, micro, macro, right? So either one only. If you focus on macro, then go ahead with macro. Don't combine these two, don't integrate both. Oh, no more. Can go back. Okay, I put this one first. So now, what I want to study now is I will pick up one, right? Yeah, pick up one. We're going to discuss covered so far in the lab test? Forget already, right? I also forget. Still remember? Don't want to remember it. Choose not to remember, right? No, cannot. I finished the question 2 already. I left few more for question number 1. I'm not going to discuss question number 1. This one I left it until the lab. How to open my normal way? How about not normal already? So small. Yeah.
Try the view.
This one.
Okay.
Yeah. So okay, I don't want this one. So okay, so this one right? Data set right without US. I don't want to look at questions. I move this one here. So okay, so as recall right? As recall, can we estimate together? Do you still have data set? You want me to open back your data set? say the revision, right? We start our revision already so fast, right? Revision in grade 12. Revision for the planner. Okay, so to make it smooth out the process, right? So I have the, just now I say I do not want the last two country, right? Yes. So I just left 16 country. EUs, right? EUs. Found new book out, right? I doing planner, right? Yes. Where's my sample size? 1960 to 1978. How many countries? 16. So I go to quick, empty group, any series, right? Yes. For all this country, for all this subset, copy, e-views, paste, right? Done. I want all of you do after that, when go to break, right, please upload the files in the spectrum. That everyone will do. Let me create one, right, for your submission. That only motivate you to move your mouse and also the open the Excel, right? Let me open the file submission, right? Should be the assignment. Good. They only got motivation to submit. So there's a file for you to submit, right? Later on submit, yeah. So this is exercise one. So in your answer, right, no need to do anything, just put one and then print screen, two, print screen, okay, click that, because so long, right? Okay, so I'm going to estimate, right? Yes, I'm going to estimate. I go to quick estimate equation. I'm going to have my log for my y, log for my x2, log for my x3, log for my x4, including my constant, right? to panel, click fix right. Okay, done. Now I can print screen happily. So X2, X3, X4 are the independent variables, yeah. X1 is my dependent. Okay. Are you okay? I think so, right? Okay, right? Then after that, you use this one, right, in your estimation. But this one, I cannot use my current case, right? I put question marks here. I'm so naughty, right? I set my file first. I go to file, new, book file. 1978. No, right? 1968 to 1978. After that, I go to prop, right? Object. New object. Full, whatever, panel, right? Then I put in my country. If you forget, right, you can refer back to your lecture note, right? I want to make sure every of you know how to do the analysis for panel before left this. After that, you go to view, right? Select data. Copy. Okay, there's nothing wrong. I think I did something wrong. Okay, there is the dummy, right? Yes. So these are things. You just go to estimate, right? You forget about the put in the one by one. You just let the memory go just now for this one. You just go back to the normal one, and then use this approve, use this command. Yeah. Now that this is my result, right? So this is my coefficient, and this is my test statistic, right? This is my coefficient, this is my test statistic, right? This is my coefficient, this is my test statistic, right? Similar, same, right? So average means that you add all these together, divided by 16. Equals to summation, right? Add all these things together equals to C17 divided by 16. Am I right? This is the average. Are you okay? Then about the random effect models, right? We just go to estimate. Change back, right? Don't use this cross. Then go back to the random. So this is my result. Right? Okay. So this is my coefficient. This is my test statistic. Am I right? Okay. So how to test? You can go to view, right? Announcement. So which one should I choose? The Houseman test now significant. So significant, right? Right? So which one should I choose? Yeah. So given us the significance of this, so the fixed effect model much more consistent, right? Efficient. So I will prefer the fixed effect model. Right? Something like this. Okay. So are you okay? So we stop at